I'll be your backstop on this one.
Okay. All right. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Human Resource Committee meeting, Tuesday, July 4th, 2023. We'll call to order. Is there any declarations of conflict of interest? Hearing none. Approval of agenda.
Mr. Chair, could I just ask under 6 reports, put B as A as B? Is that all right?
Yes, that's fine, thank you. So we'll move to rearrange the agenda report order. Okay. Adoption of the minutes from the special meeting, June 9th, 2023.
Second. Yeah.
Thank you. Any business arising from the minutes?
No.
I do have one piece of, at the last meeting, we discussed the community engagement officer position. I think we talked about, actually it was at the meeting of council on Monday, the last Monday meeting of council, we talked about also resurrecting the job description that we all understand still exists. We know that the position is still there and the funding of that was reallocated. So I'd like to be able to have that so that the HR committee can do a review of the position and to look at possibly a gap analysis around where we feel there is some desire by some of the councillors to revisit that position and to look to see if there's any gaps in what is not being provided by the mayor's office around that position, so.
I thought we had an answer for that at the council meeting, why we didn't go with it, and I think council was happy with that. Is that not correct?
But I think we talked about revisiting the description, the job description, to see what it was. I'm trying to find out what the difference between what we're doing now and to Councillor Twheel's request on that position and feeling like there's still a need for it. So I think we need to figure out if there was an article in the paper this week regarding that discussion. So it was brought to the media around that engagement officer position. So at the very least, I just want to see what the differences in those are.
Yeah, but I don't see it going forward. I don't see it on what's it in the governance review, which they reviewed all the positions. I mean, I guess you're just looking for the information to be able to get back to a councillor.
Yeah, I think it's just to continue the justification of that position and where it's at and, you know, and what services are being offered to council, mayor and council in relation to what Councillor Tweel believes that position should do and offer for council, mayor and council.
No, that's fine. I think, like I said, for me, the question was answered, but I mean, if you want to
Yeah,
belabor it
because,
further, then go ahead.
yes, and
Mr. Chair.
I agree with, go
Councillor
ahead, Your
Ramsey?
Worship.
Mr. Chair, if you go back to the minutes, it says with the duties of the community engagement officer being redistributed back to the admin assistant in the cultural and economic coordinator position, it was determined that the community engagement assistant position would be eliminated. Now, as you know, we have the executive assistant to the office of the mayor and council and an assistant to the executive assistant. They are also responsible for each councillor, and this is because of Councillor Bernard that put this in the budget several years ago, is that each councillor has an allotment of funds to do activities within their wards, and that's coordinated through the executive assistant to the office of the mayor and the office of councillor, and they try to do some of the organizing, but I think in the past, and other councillors can speak to it, that if they want to do a community meeting, that they reach out to the community volunteers to get that word out, whether it's dropping off leaflets, pamphlets, notices. And I think the office that we rely on, the executive assistant of the office of the mayor and the office of councillor, they can provide assistance in printing and so forth. But I think the work that's being done now by our senior comms officer, we have an assistant comms officer, and I think we have a third person working in comms. So 4 comms people now taking care of that whole portfolio that was always under one umbrella, the community engagement officer. Now we've provided more bodies to help and assist council, the office of council and the office of mayor. So I think that
And I'm good with that, Mr. Mayor. I think it's really just looking at that and saying, okay, the role of that thing is being fulfilled by thing, and then we can look to determine that that is the case and move forward.
Yeah, so I'm just
it's just,
asking that, you're right, for the next regular monthly meeting of council or the fourth Monday of every month, if it does come up, that our manager of human resources provides a quick summary of what we're doing going into the future. Thank you.
So if we looked at that position, Emily, in the sense of saying previously it did X, Y, Z, we are now still getting X, Y, Z, just in a different way, multiple things, that's where I'm trying to get to. Is just, is there anything that we're not receiving as a result of that so that we can assure any of the council members that the role of the previous community engagement officer is being fulfilled by 4 or 5 different resources providing the same thing? That's purely all I'm looking for.
Sure, thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to take the job description back and do a comparison to make sure we're covered off everywhere, if that'll satisfy the council's
so, yep.
needs.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And just one final point, Mr. Chair, I know you don't want to belabor this too long, but 4 positions in comms, 2 positions in the office of the mayor and office council, 1 position down in economic, cultural and economic coordinator position. That's 7 bodies working on getting the word out on behalf of councillors. So I think it's how a councillor or myself coordinates that, but that is.
And maybe that's the thing, is we need to understand then how we access that. If there was a perception that we could have got that in a certain role before, and if it's now divided up amongst a certain group of people, how do we access that? So I think it's just kind of
Yeah.
getting that information out and say, this is what it is, this is what it looks like, and this is how you access it, and we're done with, and we could be done with it.
Good point.
As opposed to thinking about, we still need to have a community engagement officer position. So I think that's all I'm trying to put to rest. Okay, thank you. Moving on to, if there's no further questions from business arising, to the report. So welcome, Eleanor, CEO Eleanor. We just did a rearranging of the things, so we're actually going to start out with the RFP for the directors.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'll take that one. So report number 0704 2023-02, Executive Search and Recruitment of Directors Contract Award. The purpose of the report is to seek council approval to award the RFP number 2023-032, Executive Search and Recruitment of Directors to Boyden. The recommendation is that the City of Charlottetown accept the highest scoring proposal from Boyden in the amount of $76,490, excluding taxes and related expenses, for the executive search and recruitment of 2 director roles, as per the file number 2023-032. The total project cost in the amount of $76,490 be funded from the 2023-2024 operating budget, and that the mayor and CAO are hereby authorized to execute standard contracts and agreements to implement the resolution. A bit of background: a request for proposal, RFP, was issued to invite qualified recruitment firms to submit proposals for the executive search and recruitment of 2 director positions with the City of Charlottetown. The closing date for submissions was May 31st, 2023. The new CAO was hired in April of 2023 and is leading the City of Charlottetown through a recently revised governance model that is designed to deliver an inclusive and streamlined organizational model for effective municipal service delivery. Within that governance model, there are 2 directors reporting to the Chief Administrative Officer and a need for a 3rd director for span of control. Directors report directly to the CAO and provide oversight on key aspects of the organization at a senior level, leading on strategic direction with assigned department heads, oversights to the public-facing and internal corporate functions within the municipal jurisdiction, and a supporting role to elected members. 1 director position is currently filled as a contract, Director of Community Services. 2 additional directors would be hired through this executive search and recruitment process. There were 10 RFP submissions that were received for the executive search and recruitment of the 2 director roles. The proposals were reviewed by an evaluation committee and were scored out of 100 against the criteria, which include approach, methodology and work plan, experience and qualifications, cost proposal, references, and completeness of submissions. Based on the scoring, the evaluation committee ranked Boyden as the highest scoring proposal. Reference checks were completed with 2 references, and all discussions were positive and indicated a high level of satisfaction with their project team and survey development, including survey delivery and final reporting. The following is a summary of the submissions, the costs, and scoring of an overall ranking. The conclusion and next steps, the evaluation committee recommends that Boyden be awarded the contract to execute the executive search and recruitment at a cost of $76,490. Following committee and council approval, senior leadership will initiate the process and work with the successful proponent in early July. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. I'll start out with just a question. Historically, when looking to fulfill leadership positions within the city corporation, I know it's been a period of time that there has been director positions. Has the practice to go outside and have that done through a recruitment firm?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My understanding is that the old director positions that existed were created during amalgamation of the municipalities where they took the leader from each municipality and put that person into a director position. So it hasn't
Okay.
been done before.
So a follow-up to that would be, so do we feel internally through yourself and HR that we do not have the capacity to do this particular role of, creating job postings, posting, interviewing candidates for a director position? I'm just, we're going out to RFP, to the tune of $76,000 to have that work done. That's not a small piece of work financially. So I'm a bit, hesitant as how come we can't do that work internally? So I was trying to get the historical context of that. So
Thank
could
you,
you
Mr.
address
Chair.
that?
So really, the reason why a consultant is being used is to ensure that we have a good candidate pool, and there's reach, because these types of positions are highly skilled, executive level, where there could be some select candidates on the island, but for a greater pool of candidates to choose from to ensure we have the best person for the job, we'll be looking on and off island. So the recruiter, especially the one that was chosen, has reach across the country and a very good success rate of filling these director roles in other municipalities.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
So the history of our directors, I remember in 2004 when the new council started, I think we hired a director of finance. That was added on to the director of community, or public services and director of corporate services. And then eventually I believe we hired a director of human resources. So I think at one point we're up to 4 directors. And then I left and then it moved different directions. So the 2 directors we're looking at, director of corporate affairs, and we have director currently occupied by a contract position, director of community service. So director of corporate services, what's the other one?
Integrated services.
I missed
Integrated services?
integrated services.
Integrated growth.
Oh, sorry.
So integrated services would be, okay, you'd look at police,
No.
no? Is that in my report here?
That's, maybe I'll let CO Eleanor, if you would like to respond to that, please.
Thank you. So through the chair, the Director of Integrated Growth is responsible for planning and heritage, economic, culture, tourism, corporate real estate, and in the coming years, municipal engineering and infrastructure. The Director of Finance and Corporate Services is responsible for asset management, human resources, finance, information technology. And then the Director of Community Services, which we currently have on contract right now, is responsible for Parks and Recreation, Public Works, and Environment and Sustainability.
Okay. So, Mr. Chair, what, are you referring to the document itself, executive search? Is that where she's getting that information?
That was in the package there.
I'm looking at the package, is what I'm
sorry.
reading. So for Director of Finance, or the Integrated Service, where does finance fall under CAO, Eleanor? Is it?
Thank you, Your Worship. It's finance is under the Director of Finance and Corporate Services.
And I know in other jurisdictions, finance is also connected with human resources. Human resources will fall under what? Community services or?
The Human Resources falls under the Director of Finance and Corporate Services.
Okay, okay. Page 6, okay. Okay, so if I go back to our governance review from KPMG, how does that line up with the KPMG report? CAO, sorry, through the chair?
Yep, go ahead, please, CEO Elder.
Thank you, Your Worship, for the question. So this was included in the last package that we came through. So we had approval for these director positions. This has now gone through council. So in terms of the KPMG report and what was approved in budget, we were approved for 2 director positions. What was different from the KPMG report, which was the addition of a 3rd director position, which was discussed and went through council. So what's being proposed here is aligned with the KPMG report, but what the KPMG report didn't take into consideration was span of control and how many direct reports should be reporting to an executive level position. So currently as the CAO, I have 15 direct reports. And because we're missing a manager of planning, I have 10 additional reports. So I have 25 people directly reporting to me right now. Our Director of Community Services has 7. So they are within the span of control. 6 to 8 is your maximum for span of control in order to manage and communicate effectively with your team. So the director positions were divided up into 3 to make sure that we fell into a good area of span and control. If this wasn't done, what would happen is I would be taking all these people that are directly reporting to me and then giving that to someone else, an unmanageable amount of direct reports. So that's why it's been divided into 3 director positions. And then also what was taken into consideration, which was also part of the KPMG report, is aligning corporate business sectors together to more efficiently break down perhaps some of the silos that we've had in communication, making sure they're reporting up to the same director so they can make sure that everyone's on the same page and we're communicating as effectively as we can and delivering services in the best way that we can.
Thank you, CEO Eller. Councillor Ramsey?
Thank you, Chair. You're on here. CAO, Eleanor, you keep referring to 3 directors you're looking for, but I only see 2 in the report. Am I missing one?
Thank you.
Oh, Sue's already
Yeah,
here?
so
Okay.
right now, Sue, as these 2
No,
directors.
no, but the report only says you're 2, and then with your statement, you kept saying, you know,
Be the
we
existing
gotta fill the 3 of them, so I keep forgetting that Sue's not gonna be here forever. We would like her to be, but, okay, so that's Sue's.
So Sue's in that role right now. We'll look to fill that director position come next spring in approval through budget process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor. Any further questions? Councillor Bernard?
Yeah, no, it's fine. We had our discussions about this. I guess, you know, one of the reasons I'd like to know what the positions are going to be, what the responsibilities and so on are going to be is because obviously the salaries come to the operational dollars, and we don't have a whole lot of them, especially if we got to pay back the province, what the province had paid us in the past. So I'm just wondering, because I look back, whenever we had 3, 4 directors, it was, as I think Eleanor or Emily had said, it was due to amalgamation, and then so those people were brought in as directors. The last number of years, we didn't have any, not saying we don't need them, but obviously the new CAO feels that we need some directors, and we approve these positions to be filled. So I'm okay with it. It's just, you know, similar to the new staff planning, where there was a proposal brought forward to us. It was done up very well, very organized. We knew what those people's positions would be, and we knew the planning was needing a lot of help because of the growth that we've been experiencing the last number of years. So I'm just wondering, though, the Director of Integrated Growth, I'm just wondering, what's the real estate portion of it, economic development and real estate? What's the real estate portion?
Go ahead, CAO, Ellen.
Thank you, and through the chair. So the city owns quite a number of pieces of land. We also have different projects that we're looking at in terms of joint development. We have no one in that role yet, so this is kind of a nod to the future. We have folks who are working on that stuff at the side of their desks, but they're not specialized in real estate or lease negotiations or all these different types of things. So that is a future position, but we're listing that as one of the items under this person's portfolio. So whoever we hire into this role, we hope that they'll have knowledge and skill base in this area as well to help fill some of the gaps that we do have.
Thank you.
When you say we have a lot of land, I don't think we do. I don't think we have a lot of.
So we have a number of pieces of land and different leases and rights of way that need to be dealt with, and some historic stuff that we saw come through the BDO of making sure that we have agreements in place. Leases that we need to keep an eye on and renegotiate. Some of that is parking. Just bits and pieces across the municipality. So this isn't this person's whole portfolio, but what we're trying to do is give a nod that this is going to be some of their work.
No, that's fine. I just didn't, okay. I just never heard of that part of it before, the real estate, because we don't really, other than our park property, as far as raw land anyway, we don't have any, really, because we're trying to build sport facilities and can't find land. So, okay, thank you, Eleanor.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, thank you for your patience here, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Chair, I go back to the governance report. It says Director of Corporate Services, list all the responsibilities, Director of Community Services, then Fire Services, Police Services report directly to, I see, the Office of the CAO. So currently we have the Director of Community Services. How does that job differ? Like what role does that play? Where does Director of Integrated, I see Building Codes, Municipal Engineer, Director of Finance, Technology, Human Resources. So everything else that falls with those other, I think you said 16 managers will fall into Community Services? Through the CAO to the CA, through the chair to the CAO, please?
Eleanor, do you want to?
Thank you,
Address that, please.
Mr. Chair. So the Director of Community Services is responsible for Public Works, Parks and Recreation and Environment and Sustainability and Water and Sewer. That's the one I forgot when I said that before.
Okay.
So I think we note that, what's interesting is we're looking at this from this RFP perspective. So we've already vetted these positions through council and approved those. So I know we're getting more clarity here, but I'm wondering if this is not the form for the more clarity on what we're doing, which is approving this RFP to go forward.
No,
So do
but
we
we're
need-
going out for a search. We're voting on an RFP to go for a search for 2 directors with 1 director. So, yeah, this is the discussion you need to have. And I just have a question about the RFP too.
But all I'm getting at there is that these positions were identified, they're already defined, and we're going out to, I don't think we're going out to define the positions is maybe what, is that maybe what why we're questioning the position so much? Because they already are currently defined, or at least in theory, but the RFP proposal, to my understanding, does not go out and help define what those director positions will look for and what they will be responsible for. Is that maybe what we're getting
No,
at, or we just get more clarity?
No, my clarity is that if you're going out to look for a director of finance, he or she will have to know what they will be responsible for. So
Yeah, well, I think that'll be defined in the
that's
position.
in the RFP, that's what's in the RFP.
Or in the job description, is what they're going to be fully responsible for, which will be defined in further detail of the RFP proposal as I read through the requirements of the RFP. And they will help design that job description, correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair, yes. So the job descriptions will be drafted. So the areas that I've talked about are key areas of the municipality in terms of responsibilities. But as for like the nitty gritty of what they're doing
Finer
day to
detail of
day
that
would be in the job description, which will be posted and the recruiter will go out for, of course.
Great, thank you. Mr. Mayor, do you have a question?
Yeah, so
the
on
RFP
page
itself?
10 of our document is the list of bidders,
Yep.
vendors, and I'm a big supporter of support local, buy local, love local. And I noticed one is pretty low down there in their presentation. So could the CAO or whoever else was responsible for evaluating, we don't have the criteria, and I'm not getting into the nitty-gritty, but just what would be some big broad strokes of the criteria for scoring? Could I ask that through the chair to the CAO or the manager of
Manager, I
Human
believe this is a
Resources?
question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A key part of the criteria was experience in filling similar roles for municipalities. So we were looking at executive level roles, director roles, and how many that the different organizations had filled and what their reach and success has been. That was in addition to other items which we've kind of outlined here, which was the approach, the methodology, the work plan, how they outlined the proposal. Was it complete? Did it have any errors? What were the timelines like? And again, the most important of, have you successfully filled these types of roles in the past?
Does that answer your question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor Brown. Okay, so if there's no further questions, we'll move on to our second report, which is the CAO 6-month review process, presentation by Andrew Demont of Boyden. Oh,
I think we could.
Oh, sorry, okay, my apologies, yeah, I thought you're right. So, sorry, we'll go back to the RFP to move that. Do I have someone to move that?
I will,
Okay.
I wouldn't mind having a copy of the scoring process, though. I thought at one time we had talked about it as a council, that we were going to be getting the process for each one of these we do for scoring. I think that would answer the mayor's questions. Probably answer a bunch of questions of what were the questions asked, how the scoring was done. That's the process.
Yeah, because that does seem to be, we're seeing that more and more across the board, CEO Elner. We're asking more as council how we're deriving to our decision. I know that there is somewhat of an explanation that says we went through the scoring thing. Well, what is it that we're getting to? And I think that may help not only ourselves, but to the proponents who are not successful. I'm not sure if you reach out afterwards and indicate to them all that for the non-successful applicants and where their shortcomings were, and the post board that you do with them. But maybe from a public perspective and ours, that it would help us to have that a little bit more in detail.
Yeah, and I
To the
think,
point of where we can, like,
yeah, no, and you're right. I think traditionally, it's always been the lowest bidder, right? A lot of times we've been doing it's always the lowest bidder. So the public is used to that lowest bidder. And now that the process has changed, and I think it's a much better process, you get better bang for the buck.
Yeah.
I just think that, as you said.
but if we can understand the difference, lowest isn't always the best. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the thing too. So
I
we
just
need to
think for
understand
elect-
the services, yeah.
For
Okay.
elected officials and for those, it'd be nice to see the process that's being followed.
Yeah, because we will be asked those questions.
Yep. Okay, so we have Councillor Ramsey and Councillor Bernard. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to the next report, the CAO 6-month review process, presentation by Andrew Demont of Boyden. I'm not sure if he's queued up here, is that? Or would someone like to set the stage for this report, please? Ellen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I can set the stage for this. So it may seem kind of weird and counterintuitive that a CAO or someone is
Set the stage,
speaking to their own review.
maybe that was a bad
But this is actually, it's quite normal that a CAO has to do this because there's no one else really to do it for them. And the reason why that is because it's very difficult for someone in HR to have to review their boss, essentially, right? So it's just me and it's council. But best practice, and you can see that what was attached to this package as well, that came from the Canadian Association of Municipal Administrators, that there is processes that we can put in place to do this. Always good to bring in a third party to just kind of facilitate the process along. Otherwise, sometimes the CAO gets put in awkward positions and we can't really have, just that evaluation process gets very complicated very quickly if you don't have some extra third person to guide you through. So that's, the annual review part has just kind of been provided for your information to get us ready for where we go annually from here. But really, what and who we have here today, as part of my hiring and on my hiring letter was an agreed to 6-month probationary period. And as part of the recruitment process, Andrew Dumont from Boyden, there is a special piece that was offered to council about a 6-month review, kind of how are we doing? Is there any feedback to be had? So in terms of the 6-month review, from here, I'm handing this to you and to Andrew to take forward. So that would be with the HR committee. And I'll let Andrew speak to more of detail of it. But HR committee kind of stick handles this until you have that larger conversation with council. And as far as I understand, and Andrew will speak to it, he will be there for you to help facilitate that process.
Right, thank you. Hello, Andrew?
Yes, sorry, I was struggling to get myself off of mute there. My apologies. Good afternoon, HR committee members, and good afternoon, Eleanor. It's good to be here. Hope all are well.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and it's great to have you here as well today. It's Justin, Councillor Matart speaking here. So I guess what we'll do is allow you to begin into your presentation. Does that work?
Absolutely, and I'll make it fairly short, and then open it up to any questions that the members might have. But yes, as Eleanor, I think, has accurately described, a standard part of our post-placement services to our clients involves the conducting of what we call a post-placement 360. And what this involves is typically anywhere between 8 and as many as a dozen participants as defined by you, typically in collaboration with the placed executive. So in this case, with Eleanor, her input as CAO. We would look to define, roughly a dozen participants who I then reach out to, not via SurveyMonkey or any online tool, but in terms of actual conversations conducted either via telephone or via video conference if felt to be appropriate. We spend 30 minutes, roughly speaking, with each individual running through a series of questions, the feedback from which is aggregated into a summary report that is unbalanced, mostly qualitative in its orientation, but with some quantitative reflection as well. So kind of rating the place executive in terms of the quality of their transition and their overall effectiveness in their new role. Now, all of this is not meant to be a critical performance appraisal. We leave that to your usual processes, and it sounds like the annual review process model that is put forward by the Canadian Association of Municipal Administrators is one that you're leaning to, and I have seen that. It is a very good model to look to. This would not be that. This could certainly be used as a lead-in to that more formal critical appraisal process at the year mark. But this is really more about providing a bit of a window for council and for the CAO on what's going well and the sort of actions, directions, styles, and behaviors that we would encourage the CAO to continue to focus on. But of course, the flip side of that coin is there's also some level of constructive feedback invariably that comes into play. And so things that the CAO may want to start, stop, or modify in terms of their direction or approach. One of the things that we also look to try and define through this 360 process are any navigational factors that could impact success for the CAO or for the broader team. And those factors typically involve culture, political realities, historical legacy, operational realities, etc. And we look to flesh those out and define those as much as we can for the place executives so that, again, in terms of navigation of this new environment and any growing pains in terms of adaptation, they're getting a very clear sense of what some of the factors are that could impact their success and their team's success moving forward. So all of these things are areas that we look to define through the conversations that I had with those various participants. And then we create an aggregate summary of all of those results. That summary is first put forward to the HR committee for their review to ensure that it is accurate, tonally correct. And what I mean by that is if there is constructive feedback, that it is framed in such a way that it becomes a developmental opportunity and it is motivating in its orientation versus anything that would be seen as deconstructive or demotivating in any way. So all to say that HR committee would have the opportunity to review. We can make any minor adjustments as required before that document is then shared with the CAO. And we can talk a little bit about how best to facilitate that conversation with the CAO as well. There's several methods by which we can approach that. I'll perhaps pause there. I know that's a fair bit of information. I'll pause for any questions, comments from committee or from anyone.
Thank you, Andrew. I will open it up for questions. I guess just starting out here myself, in trying to, get a handle on the responsibility of the HR committee in this process, I will make an assumption that is led by myself, the chair, and working with the other members on the committee outside of the CAO and Emily and possibly Sue as a director. Is that a correct assessment?
Yes, that would be correct.
Okay. So is there a point in time when we embark on this exercise that they are removed from that process, and then I guess the direct communications are between like myself and the committee and you?
Yes, that would be accurate. So at a certain point, we effectively go in camera, and the majority of the direct work and interface would be coordinated in collaboration between my office and the HR committee. However, to the extent possible, we understand you're all very busy and you have a lot of other fish to fry, and so to the extent that you're comfortable, my team and I are happy to front as much of the logistical burden as is required once the participant list has been defined, and then we can go away and do our work and simply report back to you on a regular basis.
Okay. And just one last question before you indicated possibly looking at 12 participants, I assume without both the corporation and with council. Is that correct?
Yes, actually, that's an excellent point, and my apologies. I should have better defined how we break out the 12. So we typically cap our normal post-placement survey at 12, but we can go beyond that amount, although, to be frank, if we were to go beyond, there would be an ancillary cost associated with that. It probably is not necessary, though. We find a dozen participants spread out across 4 key groups is a broad enough data set, if you will, upon which to aggregate and create a solid feedback loop. Those 4 group areas being council, and so the sort of supervisory band, if you will. Ideally, we like to have someone at sort of we'll call it the client or colleague level. Now, at a CAO, there's not a whole lot there in terms of colleague that is typically at play. But if there were client or other peer-ish sort of individuals to be defined and included in that bucket, we would certainly want them in there. Certainly direct reports. So in this case, we obviously wouldn't be able to tap everyone given the number of direct reports the CAO currently has, but a subset of that group certainly. And then for a CAO role, given its connection to the community, we always encourage as well a number of community or external representatives. Could be provincial government, whomever you feel is most appropriate and in the best position to provide objective feedback relative to the CAO's time up to this point. That would be the fourth bucket. And so looking at probably 3 individuals in each of those buckets, and we can shift a little bit here and there. It can be 4 in one bucket, 2 or 3 in another, but those would be the 4.
So do you envision the HR committee making the recommendations on the 4 buckets and the potential participants within that, or would that be perceived a bit of a conflict if the CAO was, or Emily, our HR manager, was recommending where we might go for that? So
I don't see it as a conflict. Most typically what occurs is the HR representative, in collaboration with the place executive, so the CAO in this case, would kind of put their heads together and generate the list that would then move forward to the HR committee for their approval. And they may choose to strike out certain names and add some of their own. Typically, that's how that list is generated.
Thank you. Councillor Ramsey?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Andrew, for that. This is something new, like this is my 3rd term, and first time I heard about buckets, about certain groups being involved in this. As you know, and everyone else knows, this is council's only hire, it's our CAO. And I don't think we ever had, maybe I'm wrong, that we had outside interest in this, for their input or staff's input. It was an evaluation sheet that we received the last time, and every councillor evaluated the CAO and put their strong points or like their concerns in that. So I'm a little sort of confused, I guess, is where these 4 buckets came from and who's all going to be involved in this, because it is a council decision and that's the only one we have. And that's just my opinion. Maybe I'm off base with this. I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you,
Well,
Councillor.
I'm happy to respond to that as well. And you're absolutely right. I mean, at the end of the day, this 360 that I've described is a Boyden process, and it was included in our original fee, and something we would certainly encourage the HR committee and council as a whole in Charlottetown to take advantage of. You have paid for it, and we do find that it has a benefit to both council and the place executive in terms of creating a lens of clarity on how things are going. But it should not supersede or take the place of an existing point of process that may already have been utilized and is trusted. It's just an additional value add on top.
Thank you. I think that is important to note that, as a council, I mean, we certainly have interactions with the CAO on a somewhat of a limited basis, depending on our committee meetings and things, and that's not for any reason other than that's just not the way we're structured. So when we have the operational people of the city corporation who can help, provide that feedback that we need, and that they're the ones that are working day to day and interacting more so. I think that would be important. So if I was to just do that evaluation myself, it would only be based on the limited interactions and opportunities that we're having based on that. I mean, I think this committee might be open to looking at the framework of what that looks like, Andrew, whether it's like, say, the Boyden framework or what we've done historically in the past, and to see what the most effective means of producing a well-informed review of the past 6 months of our CAO and going forward.
Yeah. So, Mr. Chair, if I could just ask a question. Coming from a teaching background, I've always looked at two evaluations, formative or summative. Formative is how we can evaluate that person to improve his or her abilities. Summative is just an evaluation of his or her job's performance. But there's other types of evaluations, impact evaluation, outcome evaluation, process evaluation. So, Andrew, what one are you going to use of those five?
Well, hi, Mayor Brown. It's good to hear your voice. I would say that this is really more of a formative evaluation. Yeah. It's about providing a lens towards areas that will allow the CAO to further develop and ideally better set herself on that path for success towards perhaps the more summative evaluation that typically occurs at the year.
So I think, Andrew, that defines the path forward. So if we're looking at a path forward in providing formative evaluation process or evaluation benchmarks, we're looking at making what our CAO is doing now, making it better, not only for council, but for the community. So I understand that, and I believe in going out beyond just our little silo, which is City Hall, and going into those other silos, which would be the business community, the general community, and other levels of government. So I agree with the outreach, because formative is always about improving that person's ability to do better for himself, herself, and for the organization he or she's working for. Thank you.
Great point, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. Is there any other questions, comments? Councilor Bernard?
Yeah, so Andrew, so who is this going out to? Can you list the four groups that you're talking about? Can you list them again for me?
Certainly. So we generally define it as so the up, down, and across, if you will, in terms of a 360. So it would be supervisory, which in this case would equate to council or the committee.
Yeah.
And you can look to define exactly who you feel would be the most relevant and suitable representatives for that group, of course. Then we have kind of the middle tier, and this is where things get slightly complicated when we're doing a CAO or a CEO, because they really don't have, I'll call it a colleague or a peer necessarily, unless you were looking to use a CAO from another municipality or something along those lines. So typically what we also group into that is clients. And so to your point, could be someone from within the business community, or it could be members of government, the Department of Municipal Affairs, et cetera. So certainly we can be a little creative in terms of what falls into that particular bucket. Then, of course, the direct subordinate bucket, which gets to the root of how credibly the individual is being perceived as a leader of the team and of the corporation. And then lastly, we have I'll call it external or community representation, which to some degree may hold some overlap in this particular case with that client bucket that I defined. But we can certainly, again, look to make them reasonably distinct. So those would be the four.
So what was the third one?
Direct
subordinates. So those that are reporting directly to your CAO.
Direct
We
one?
went to,
So staff that would be under the CAO?
Correct.
so like two would be a direct subordinate to her and all the managers.
Okay, no, and I'm game to try anything once. I just find that when you have people that the CAO is responsible for, if there's a conflict or bad feelings, or you have the business community who doesn't agree with if they can't come to agreement, they don't like her, it's probably not going to give a fair assessment when it comes back. I mean, I could think of some people in the planning for the building industry that probably would not get along with our CAO for some of the decisions that we make. And I think it would probably reflect poorly on the CAO if they don't get along with them. But like I say, I'm game to try things once, but I think at the end of the day, council makes the final decision. So it's probably council's review that would probably hold the most weight.
Absolutely. Well, and I'll mention too that who you select is very important in this process. And so if we are already aware that there is likely an antagonistic relationship that exists for whatever reason between the CAO and a potential participant, that participant is probably best to be avoided. What we are looking for in each of these buckets are individuals who can provide candid, objective, honest and authentic feedback, whatever that may be. But if there is a natural predisposition to a certain place, whether that's positive or negative, those sorts of individuals should likely best be avoided. And so that's where, as we look at creating this list of, say, a dozen participants, there is some importance in terms of which names are put forward.
So where do those names come from, Andrew? Who forwards those names?
So ideally, it's Eleanor in collaboration with your HR manager who create the initial list. But then this group, HR committee, would then look to approve that list and or to substitute their own names if they're not in agreement.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah. Councillor Ramsey?
Thank you, Chair and Andrew. And Councilor hit the topic I was going to hit on too. Like, it's not everyone in the world likes their boss, so we got to be so careful of who's going to be chosen and who's not. And on that part, like, I'm a little leery on that one, because if there's a supervisor or a manager's names there, and I know we're going to review them all, but if they're having a bad day, there's not going to be a very good recommendation. And who approves the names? Is it the HR committee? Or I think you already answered that, but I'm trying to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's correct. So the HR committee would be in the driver's seat in approving the participant list. In terms of your earlier point about folks having a bad day or the kind of feedback that can be received, you're absolutely right. And I would expect and have experienced directly that there will always be some level of constructive or critical feedback. The importance of having more than one representative per bucket or category of participant is crucial here as well, because if, all, say, for sake of argument, we define 4 direct reports, Sue and, say, 3 managers are fulfilling the participants for that particular group, and they all come back with, on balance, constructive feedback, then we have a consistency of theme there upon which to report and ideally to create feedback and maybe some action items. But typically it doesn't play out that way. Normally you get a lot of validation of particular themes by having several individuals within a single participant bucket. And so you might get some one-off comments, but normally there is a weighting to positive or negative on balance, I find.
Thank you, Andrew. I think just in spirit of time here and looking at kind of where we go next, I think we've had a lot of great discussion here on this topic. It's clearly new territory for council. It sounds like we have a couple different frameworks to explore, and I think we need to go away as a committee and look at the path that we want to take forward based on your recommendations, industry standards, but also, looking at some of the existing practices that we have as well. I don't think we're going to solve here today the kind of path forward. I'm not sure that was even in scope for today, but certainly appreciate the time and to come on and do your presentation. And I guess more of the question is, what are the next steps?
Well, we are at your behest on that, and so you let us know what you'd like to do and when you'd like to undertake it, and happy to reconnect and to discuss that further. But I mean, from our standpoint, it's as simple as once an approved list of participants has been created and that group of individuals has been informed that they will be contacted by Boyden, my team and I take the next step, and we typically send out a letter of sorts just to again underpin the purpose of the 360, It puts forward a few questions that we ask each participant to start thinking about. And then, of course, we push into people's calendars and we look to get those calls or video conferences scheduled. And then we move forward. And typically the entire process takes 2 to 3 weeks, I'll say, depending on the time of the year and participant availability. But we will be ready to go whenever this group makes a decision.
Okay, so one final thing to that, I know that, Eleanor, your 6 months, I believe, is September. So, Andrew, do we do that pre-September or post-September in that sense? Or, in fairness, we started today, she'd be 4 months, you'd only been in the position 4 months versus 6 months. So how, in kind of getting this rolling, and we got summer to deal with and vacations and things of that nature. So logistically, there might be some challenges there. But we can.
I would agree.
work that
My
schedule.
recommendation is to, sorry.
My apologies. I said we can work that schedule out. I just wanted to know kind of when more of that starting around that September area.
Yes, indeed. I think you're absolutely right, Justin. I think doing it closer to the actual 6-month mark is not only fair from the standpoint of the assessment, but in this particular case also helps with the summer vacations and some of the logistical issues we'll likely encounter.
Thank you very much.
And Mr. Chair, just going back to the final, what was discussed, Andrew's made it very clear, it will be a formative evaluation, which is about improving his or her role in his or her position. So I think whoever we pick, the framework will be given to those individuals that this is formative, it's not summative, it's not impact, it's not outcome, it's not process, it's about how do we make our CAO better for the city corporation, municipal government, working with provincial and federal government politicians or bureaucrats. So that's what we have to keep in mind. That's the focus.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
CAO Eleanor, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr.
Comment?
Chair. I was just going to suggest perhaps as a next step, we can schedule in HR committee for August, like you would meet once a month, like you normally do. And then in the meantime, Emily and I can compile a list of different individuals for you to provide you with at that meeting. And perhaps we can schedule Andrew in for a call and you can have a discussion with or without me here on the individuals that you'd like to discuss. And then that can set you up for August moving into September in terms of Andrew reaching out to the different contexts and doing the interviews.
Mr. Chair?
Thank you. Yes, Councilor Ramsey.
CAO, Eleanor, is it fair for you to pick? No, I'm just looking at the end road here, I don't want to have anyone thrown underneath the bus, and you'll have somebody come back to us and say, well, they picked this person because they get along great with this person, I'm just looking at the whole thing, that's all.
Yeah. I'd have to admit, I'm struggling with that concept as well, that Andrew has put forward in the framework. So I'm not sure, like I said, I'm more concerned about the perceived conflict of interest in that. We talked earlier about getting people who want to be subjective and honest, and so it's easy to go find those people versus find the ones who wouldn't be. So, but again, it goes back to the theme of the formative, but so I just still struggling to marry those two up together, so.
Mr. Chair, I think Andrew's made it clear that these names will come back to us.
Yep.
We'll make it
But we don't
a
know their
look at them.
relationship.
And you know what? Maybe Councillor Ramsey has someone that he knows who works or lives in the community that wishes to be part of that evaluation. I think it's great. That's the discussion about openness, transparency, and accountability. So, and I'm glad that Andrew's given us an early enough start. We're month 4 of a 6-month review, and I'm quite confident the review will go quite well. Thank you.
Your Worship, and I just don't want to have any skeletons in the closet, I guess is what I'm trying to say, because if I'm hired to coach a hockey team, I'm going to hire my assistant coaches who I believe is going to back me up, for example, or my GM or something like that, and we don't want any cloud over this, I guess is what I'm trying to say, Eleanor, for your safety and our safety, and I mean, the mayor keeps saying open and transparency, the 2 words that I love, as he knows, but but at the same time, you know, we gotta, if it's gonna be open and that, let her go open, and we don't want somebody to say, well, how come she picked these people? You know, that's all I'm saying.
Councillor Bernard?
You know, you could take that part out. I mean, the other thing about this is, it's only been 6 months. Not like a whole lot of the community really knows her anyway. And that's why I talked about it a little bit earlier. I kind of wonder, you know, depending who's picked and who knows who, and I just wonder at the end of the day, it's council that'll have to make that decision, and council has their ears to the ground. I agree with you, and I agree with Councillor Harris.
But I think we have to be clear. My understanding is this committee will make that decision, not council will make that decision.
What's that?
This committee will make the decision on the participants, not council making.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the position, I'm talking
Okay.
about at the end of the day.
Oh, at the end of the day,
when review
yeah.
is done, it comes back, the council will
Okay.
make the final decision,
Yeah.
so. To me, you know, someone's been here 6 months, I'm not sure there's going to be a whole lot of community involvement or community discussion or opinions anyway, so. Yeah, so maybe that particular bucket you take out.
Right, we'll see. Thank you. CAO Elner?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So that's the awkwardness of this position. So if I were to stack people who agreed with me and just loved me, then there's nowhere for me to grow. And the point is to evaluate it to show which areas are weaknesses or maybe blind spots for me that I need to develop out. So if I stack the interviews, that doesn't do me any service except for make me look really shiny. So my thought is you don't know all the people that I've met with in the community, so at least if I can provide you with that list of individuals, that would be good. And we can have a conversation internally about staff. And, you know, maybe my peers, CAO from Stratford is a good example, or municipal affairs. So we can formulate that list, and then you can debate who on that list you would like to have this conversation with. And the timing, and here's another frank thing coming from your CAO, the timing of this is important. Because if you really did not like me, that probationary period is 6 months. So if you really did not like me, awkwardness of a CAO, you'd want to remove me within those 6 months. So that's why this is being put before you now.
And I'm not suggesting, Eleanor, that you're gonna stack your list or anything, don't get me wrong.
Oh, no,
But
that's not
you know, I just wanna make the point that if someone's gonna ask us a question, who picked this list? And then you know what some of them are like, you know, they're gonna say, well, why did she pick the list? Because she's sort of getting the people to evaluate her own position. And that's the thing, like, that's the cloud I'm trying to get rid of. But by any means, I am not suggesting that you stack your list. You know,
So I think
I just want to clarify
I think we'll
that.
let Andrew, and we'll work with Andrew on the process.
Yeah.
And the process can come to us with a well-qualified list of people, and we will decide as to how we want to do that. Although, it's not you picking or approving those, it is more of identifying who you have worked with and things that you have had relationships with. So I think it's important to note that. Internally, we can certainly look at opportunities to remove you from picking certain people internally. Council could do that for the most part if we wanted to. And then who we want council to represent the same thing. So I think you may be more inclined to provide you with your external clients and resources that you've had relationships and worked with in the past. And we can look at the internal side.
And Mr. Chair, just declare a process. Yes, we will make a recommendation to council to approve the list. That's, yeah, we make a recommendation to council, so there'll be another debate. And again,
that's what we have to
the
go with.
focus is on a formative evaluation. That's what we're looking at. And it's not about getting rid of her CAO, it's about improving the abilities that she presents to this job. Like, it's not a summative, like, it's a form. That's what we have to be focused on. And as you said earlier, Mr. Chair, that will be the direction given to this group, that this is about improving, not about tossing this person. Keep that in our mind, because I've gone through these evaluations as a teacher, and they're not the most pleasant evaluations to go through, because sometimes during the formative evaluation, you do get critical comments, and you go, oh, I never thought of it through those lenses. So that's what I'm looking at, and I think where we're at now, let's sail away. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Andrew, are you still there? Thank you.
I am indeed.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Andrew, for your time this afternoon. We look forward to working with you going forward, and we will be in touch.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you, members of HR Committee. Thank you, Eleanor.
Thanks, Andrew.
Take care.
Okay, moving through the agenda, we have any introduction of new business? Hearing none? Adjournment? Mayor Brown, second by Councillor Ramsey. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, CEO. Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Janine. Thank you.